What if I told you I want to play Mario Kart Wii, but I want it to look wider and flatter? Hi internet, Arc speaking. A couple months back, I was watching one of my friends play Mario Kart Wii. Now, this particular friend has a history of playing competitive shooters, so it didn't surprise me that much when I found out that he also plays Mario Kart Wii in stretched res. But the more and more I thought about it, I began to wonder, are there actual advantages to playing in stretched res for Mario Kart? In my friend's case, he's just used to it, which, clarification, is a perfectly good reason, especially in a competitive game where comfort and familiarity is a very important factor. But I was still curious. Now let's back up a bit. I'm sure there are some of you who are watching this wondering what in the world is this stretched res thing I'm talking about. In competitive CSGO and Fortnite, a lot of players change the aspect ratio of their game from 16:9 to a more square resolution, like 4:3. Then stretch it back out to fit the screen, hence the name stretch res or stretched resolution. According to my research, in CSGO this makes it so opponents are wider and easier to see, and if I had to take a guess, if you lower the sensitivity on your mouse, it also makes them easier to hit. For Fortnite, it does the opposite, making the field of view larger from a vertical standpoint, so it's easier to spot targets above or below you, which helps you, I guess, build stuff? I'm sorry, I don't know much about Fortnite, I've never played it. But one universal advantage for both games is you get a higher frame rate as your computer has less pixels to render, making it so low-end hardware has an easier time keeping up. So let's first change our resolution, or more accurately, the aspect ratio on the Wii, by going into the Wii setting. Under aspect ratio or widescreen settings, you could change it from 16:9 to 4:3. After I hit save, my Wii did a quick graphics change and it was ready to go. Now the first thing I wanted to check was the field of view. Here's two images, one in 16:9, another is in stretch 4:3. The first thing that you may notice is the field of view is a little bit smaller on stretch res compared to normal. However, another small thing that you only really notice when racing is the camera is much lower to the ground. Now lower field of view at first may seem like a disadvantage, however if you really think about it, Mario Kart Wii, in particular the inside drifting bikes inside Mario Kart Wii, share a lot of similarities to a typical shooting game. Tiny alignments and adjustments is the primary way to go fast in this game, so if you could do shortcuts and pump out accurate lines just a little bit faster because it's easier for you to see your alignment, then this is actually a clear positive. Now you could argue that a lower field of view, and therefore not being as aware of the people around your blind spots, is a negative. But every competitive Mario Kart Wii player knows you're supposed to look behind you and listen for audio cues anyway. The game has ways to deal with these problems that are more effective than having a slightly wider camera. However, I'm sure some of you guys don't believe me, so I compiled a bunch of common wheelie bump clips and averaged them out to see if the extra field of view actually does something. Now for this example, to explain how I calculated this, I'm going to be using one of my clips. The average human reaction time is about 215 milliseconds, and by going into a video editor and measuring the time between when the target shows up on my screen compared to when I could have reasonably done something about it, the difference in the clip is about 192 milliseconds. Which is fast, but especially since I know my own average reaction time, not impossible. However, the one caveat that some of you guys may know about this game is it takes 3 frames to do pretty much any action. That's hop, drifting, using an item, all of that has a 3-frame buffer. So you need to subtract 3 frames, which would bring down the minimum reaction time needed for this particular clip from 192 milliseconds to 174 milliseconds. Granted, this particular example was on the higher end of the spectrum for my test poll. The average time for most of these clips is around 195 milliseconds, which regardless of aspect ratio is a little bit on the fast side, but it's still playable. So where does this myth that 4:3 is disadvantageous come from? Well, in order to understand that, we need to talk about raw reaction time. My personal raw reaction time is about 182 milliseconds, which is about 40 milliseconds faster than the human average. But then we have to ask ourselves, why am I still getting wheelie bumped in situations that have a reaction time window of well over 200? This is a video topic in and of itself, but it ultimately comes down to intuition and information, which leads to anticipation. Anticipation. This is the single most underrated skill in this game, but I find it actually somewhat humorous because every other competitive game I play, this is one of the very first things that people will try to teach you. In CSGO, it's called crosshair placement. Instead of wasting your time searching around till your cursor finds your target, if your crosshair is already on the right spot, all you have to do when you see an opponent is pull the trigger, which makes it so that you could react much faster. In Mario Kart Wii, this translates into common wheelie bump and backspam spots. Despite what you may believe, good players don't actually have more inhumane reaction time than the rest of us, but what they do have is experience, which translates to data to anticipate oncoming traffic, and backspam spots. So all they have to do when a green shell or an opponent pops on their screen is press the hop button. So for example, if you get wheelie bumped on the first straight of Delfino Square, it's almost 100% the player who gets wheelie bumped's fault. However, if you anticipate someone potentially lagging into you, then all you gotta do is wait for someone to come into your near vicinity, and then drop the wheelie. Like I said, this is a big topic that warrants its own video, but hopefully that explains why reaction time and field of view isn't as important as some people make it out to be. One final note to make before I go from the lab to the track is the concept of LBFTs. And look, I know, you guys don't like me talking in abbreviations, but this is a real phenomenon that stands for looked, but failed to see, and happens a lot in real life with motorcycles on the road. Inside an article written by the Associations for Psychological Science, they ran a demonstration where they would show participants images from a driver's perspective, with either a motorcycle or a taxi on the second to last image. 61% of participants failed to notice the motorcycle compared to 31% that missed the taxi. So why is it so hard to see motorcycles? A common theory is the sheer scarcity of motorcycles on the road compared to cars, so perhaps the human mind isn't as mentally prepared to anticipate a bike, the same issue that we were talking about before. But another theory I've heard by actually talking to real-life motorcyclists is the fact that our brains might not be as wired up to see tall objects as have mass, as most motorcycles with people on them are actually taller than a lot of cars. So perhaps another explanation is that motorcycles aren't visible to the human eye because they don't have as much width. Which, going back to our stretch res, by making our characters wider, it might make it easier to see other players. But from my perspective, that's just a theory. I am no scientist, so I have no way of testing if that's actually true or not. Okay, so it's been about a week since I began playing stretch res, and I have a few thoughts on the Switch that I want to share with you all. The first thing I noticed after switching was in the beginning I was running into walls when trying to take 90+ degree turns. I was actually still adjusting to the visual cues and shifts in details, but after only about a few hours I began to adapt, and began to enjoy playing 4x3. Now for the biggest advantage I noticed when playing in stretch res was, as I hypothesized, how easy it was for me to do alignment based shortcuts. I was able to do GBA Bowser's Castle 3 Shroom way faster and more consistently than I ever could before. For any of you guys who have watched me play competitively, you know I am not good at the GBA Bowser's Castle 3 Shroom Cut. And second off, this may sound weird, but I actually like the low to the ground sensation you get when playing stretch res. It reminds me of riding in the passenger seats of my dad's old Integra. It makes you feel more connected to the road, even though it's a purely visual thing. Now for the downsides, I only had one issue with wide 4x3, but it's a pretty big issue, and that's stretch res looks hideous as a spectator. After a while, you get used to it, and I've gotten to the point I don't even think about it anymore, but from a viewer's perspective, it's not great to look at. That's why on my stream, I have it set up to look like stock 4x3, even though what I'm looking at on my monitor is quite a bit different than what you as the viewer would see. But on the other side of that, this also allowed me to bring back something I used to do way back in my old streams, and that's to have a place on the screen to have a dedicated chat box. So in a roundabout way, for me in particular, it's actually a positive, but generally speaking, that is a pretty heavy negative. So after all this testing, the final question I'm sure no one is asking, but everyone wants to know, am I now going to switch to 4x3 permanently? Well, for the tutorials and videos, I'm still going to be using 60x9 because, like I said, it just looks better. But for my streams, and when I play on my own time, yes, I do plan on sticking with stretch res because I like the way it feels to play on. And ultimately, that should be the deciding factor for you. After all this testing, I can comfortably say that there is very little difference from a technical or advantageous perspective between stretch res and stock. My times didn't improve or go down, I can't tell any difference when playing online now, and I could comfortably play on either aspect ratio that any Wii is set to. All that to say, be open-minded about things. I honestly thought for the longest time 16x9 was the best way to play MK Wii, but after testing, I was pleasantly surprised to see that it wasn't that simple. If you think stretch is ugly, play 16:9. If you don't care about looks but can't physically get close to your monitor, or perhaps you're struggling to see alignments, try stretched. And don't let anyone bully you into fitting in just to fit in. I'll see you all next time. Happy racing.